Now it's time to meet the people who worked on the show. Please welcome director Jim Field-Smith. Co-producer Richard Kerbaj.
Where am I sitting here?
And please welcome our very special guest, Marina Litvinenko.
Right. Marina.
Richard, let me start with you. You've been working on this story a long time. You made a documentary for Channel 4, which was excellent. What was your role in creating this drama, though, about this dramatic version of the story?
Yes, so very early on, as you said, I really wanted to turn this story into a drama to begin with, and I couldn't to begin with, and so I turned it into a documentary. And then we flipped it to this, and from the beginning, and I must sort of do a shout out here to a few people because they're kind of like this unsung heroes in this whole thing, but I was first approached by Lucy Bedford from Tiger Aspect, and I sat with her and Kat Moulton to discuss this, and they immediately said there is a drama series to be done on this. And then I met with Patrick Spence and with George Kay, the writer, and it was for me it was a different pace to what I was used to, because I come from newspaper journalism and documentaries, and they sort of guided me through. And what was fascinating is seeing the process work, how you take a story like this and turn it into a dramatic piece. And of course then Jim came on board, and then lockdown happened and everything sort of just went quiet, and it looked like everything was going to collapse. But so the reason why I thought it had this sort of great dramatic edge is because I really, through my writing, I tend to follow the stories of sort of detectives and or spies, and I had met with Marina and told her from the very beginning that I wanted to do something with this story. And once the team started to get sort of assembled, they really did sort of carry everything through. So, you know, from Lucy and Patrick to Jim to George, and I got on board the contributors, so all of the real live people, and it was fascinating seeing that process. You know, the actors interacting with the contributors, but at all times I kept Marina in the picture, because really the heart and soul of this series was always going to be Marina, because you can have a detective tale, but to humanize that tale you need a sense of drama, but a sense of humanity, and that's pretty much where Marina came in. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
No, you have,
or just gone on. Yeah.
There's a note at the beginning of the series pointing out that it's a drama based on an enormous amount of research and interviews and recorded evidence, etc. Did you have to do a lot of that yourself, particularly for this series?
So I'd done all of that. So by the time, the great thing about having the documentary was almost like adapting a book, as it were. But then what George was great at doing is he went a bit further. So I would introduce George to some of the contributors, and also Jim. And I wanted them to get a sense of these people, because the problem with doing a lot of research journalistically is that you come at something from a specific angle. And what it required fresh eyes. And so everyone was able to feed into that process and provide a new sort of perspective. And I think that's why it became what it became, because you just had a great sense of, great insights. And, you know, I saw Jim working on the set, I saw George working on the script, Lucy and Patrick on guiding us through. And it's such a fascinating process, and I think what made it really work is this sense of ownership that we had of it, because we wanted to own it. This was the story that we were supposed to, we wanted to tell, but also the commitment we had to it because of the promise that we made Marina. And I think even Marina at one point, she was like, is this really going to happen? And then, we made it happen.
Marina, when the idea was put to you that to make a drama of your story, of you and your husband's story, what was your initial thought? What did you think of that idea?
It was not first time when people wanted to do a drama based on my story. First time it was in 2007, and it's supposed to be a big project in Hollywood. Columbia Pictures, Michael Mann, and a lot of promise. And then I just believed it would be very important to do, to make it as a memory, or if it's not any justice, it would be kind of justice for me. I mean, memory, it's my way. People will remember for what happened. But it didn't happen, and I can't say I was disappointed. I just, okay, if it's not happened, it didn't happen. Then it was a different process. It was not only investigation, this was preparing for inquest, for public inquiry. I was more preoccupied of doing this. And when it was a lot of documentary project based on this justice way, I was not thinking about dramatization of my story at all. But then Richard said we met, and first step, it was documentary, and then he told me we're going to do drama. I was again very relaxing. It might happen, it might not happen. But every time when Richard said we're going to do this, I said, okay. And even COVID, when it was some pause, and we were a little bit unsure, maybe it will be not happen again. But I was again relaxed. And when it finally was saying we started, I just realized I have another tool in my hands. And it would be very good to remind people for what happened now, almost 16 years ago. Exactly, tomorrow, 23rd of November, a day of anniversary. But I really pleased it was this angle taking about police work. It was very important to show. Even police was so shocked, not so prepared for what happened in London. And the same like other people. And it's very right things to remind it now, particularly when we have very terrible things happened in Ukraine. And I see very strong link between for what happened in 2006 and what is happening now in 2022.
So for you, this series is an important part of getting the story out there again and to reminding people of the truth of the situation.
And what I said is not only historical fact, it's just like a first chapter, and what tragedy we are front of now started then. Maybe even earlier, but people just didn't want to see this. And when it's now a lot of questions why and how it did happen, maybe this film might remind what we have missed,
yeah.
And maybe not to miss it again.
Absolutely, yeah. Jim, for you as the director, you've worked with George Kay before, who wrote the series. Mm-hmm. George can't be here, he's, I think, busy in Paris.
Yes.
On brilliant, thrilling, fictional crime dramas. Mm-hmm. So what was it like for you? What was the main challenge for you as director directing this true story?
I suppose not to make it into a, as you just said, a thrilling drama, because the story, the facts of the story speak for themselves. And I think our main approach from the start was to honour the people involved in the story and honour the facts of the story. I think it would be easy to approach a story like this and say, oh, there's all these kind of sensational details, and it might be tempting to sort of lean into those details too much. I think for us, we sort of almost went the other way and tried to find what the human angle into the story was. And because of Richard's work on the documentary and his work with Marina and with the Metropolitan Police officers that worked on the case, and with Ben Emerson, the QC, who worked with Marina on taking it to public inquiry, we actually were able to speak to all of the real people involved in the story. And so it immediately, to me, becomes more interesting. Because I think as an audience, you maybe know some of the surface details of the case. And, you know, I don't think the behaviour of the Russian state is surprising to anybody at this point. It may have been a little bit more surprising in 2006, but certainly in 2022 it's not surprising to anybody. And so I think what's more interesting is to tell the story of a family and to tell the story of the they're cops, but they're regular people, the people that investigated the case and saw the same thing that we did, which was a family that had been, violently assaulted, and to bring justice for that family. And so that was our way in from start to finish, really.
And so, in a way, the look of the series is it's kind of unflashy, and it is kind of you've established a kind of riveting. I mean, the story itself is obviously riveting, but I think the way it's been put together by you and George, the writer, it is endlessly fascinating. And it's interesting, for example, the decision to go straight in with the story. There's no messing about. You kind of go right in there with the crucial incident that sparked the whole tragic loss of Alexander.
Yeah, I think I wanted it to feel, because we had this, I suppose we had this sort of sense of authenticity, or that we felt supported by the family and by the police and by the lawyers that worked on the case. We then, for me, I just felt like, well, let's just take that forward into how we make the show. And so I wanted to remove as many layers in between the camera, essentially, and the story that's being told, and to not try and force the directing style onto the piece, or the filmmaking style onto the piece. And so for me, it was about going the other way and saying, how can we remove what one might consider to be filmmaking? And so you've just seen the first episode, but across the series, we follow the detectives as they continue to investigate the case, and as it expands, we went to many, if not all, of the real locations where these events occurred. We followed the detectives to those locations. We shot in all throughout central London in the height of the pandemic, which was kind of interesting. We follow the Metropolitan Police to Moscow, where they go to interview Levieva and Kovtun. We didn't go to Moscow. You won't be surprised to hear.
You should tell him where we filmed Moscow.
We filmed Moscow in and around East London.
The magic of
the magic of Moscow.
That's very unfair, but it's true. No, our art department did an incredible job of recreating Moscow within the UK. But yes, we went to the Royal Courts of Justice. We tried to, without being obsessed with it, we tried to be fastidious about how we recreated those places, and that was really important to us, because I think once you've kind of nailed down those details, you can allow the story to take place around it.
Marina, what was it like for you? Did you meet Margarita Levieva, who played you? Did you want to meet her? And if you did meet her, what was that like?
Yes, I met her, and we have even very interesting connection. Margarita's stepfather was a lawyer who met our family in 2000 in Istanbul, not in Ankara, when we decided might be America would be a safe place to go, and we went to American embassy, and we need a lawyer, and this lawyer was presented by Alex Goldfarb, and it was stepfather of Margarita. And when Alex Goldfarb told me about Margarita as an actress in United States, it was not again any idea she might play in this show. He just told me about her as a stepdaughter of this lawyer, and she's actress. And when suddenly, before started this whole casting, Alex Goldfarb calling me from United States and said, Marina, do you know Margarita will play you? No, she will be asking for audition. I said, oh my God, we've all been shocked.
Yeah.
Yes. And when we met first time and we agreed for this meeting, I said, okay, I will come to pick you up from your address. And what's the address? And she told me her address. I was shocked again, because it was our first post address in London. Not exactly street, I mean, it's the same street, not the same house number, but the same street. it was unbelievable. And when we were sharing, because she's Russian and she was very young when she moved to United States, but she completed her study as economist, like me. I was finished economical oil and gas institute in Moscow, but my passion of dancing made me completely different, took me completely different direction. And the same as Margarita, she finished her degree, but she went for acting after that. And this was very interesting.
Fantastic. And what did you make of David Tennant playing Sasha?
No, first of all, when I heard this name, I was really said, okay. But it's every time difficult to understand how it's possible to be close to my husband. And of course, David Tennant, I know his characters and again, my husband. But when I saw what David did, it's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. It makes me feel very grateful for what people did. And this was not simply acting. It was not simply job done. It was very much from their heart. And why I was so easy to go for this agreement, to do this drama, because I knew this would be very, very close and very accurate. Yeah. What actually I believe happened.
Richard, we should say that I've watched the whole series, and it follows. There's a political element. There's the political kind of conflict, if you like, between politicians and the police. It touches upon the issue of, is there any chance of, if you did find out who's responsible, of extraditing them? Is there one particular message, do you think, that you want the audience, the viewers, to take away from this very complex, densely layered story?
I think so many people would take so many different messages from this, but specifically in the context of what's happening in the world right now, there are so many correlations between the way that the Kremlin has a complete disregard for international laws, but also I think it's a great reminder about the geopolitics of it all, because of course at the very beginning when Putin came to power in the late 1990s, he gave the impression that he was a friend of the West, and he even gave the impression during an interview with the BBC that in the event that Russia is invited to join NATO, it may even do so as long as it's treated as an equal partner. And he was very much brought into the fold. This is post-Soviet Union collapse. And so at the beginning of 2001, he was very much in the camp, and then September 11 happened, and he became again an ally with the West against Islamist extremism. And the reason why the Livinenko case is so crucial to the relationship between the West and Moscow is because it became a real crucial turning point in the way that the West viewed and reassessed their understanding of Moscow, because up until then they were technically a friend again, and then with the killing and the murder of Alexander Litvinenko, they realized that they're not a friend and they need to be sort of watched. And I think from that moment, so this is 16 years ago, that's when there was a step change in the way that the West considered Russia, and that's still the case. So that was a real key turning point geopolitically, and also a turning point in the way that the intelligence services in the West, and in particular the UK, viewed the Kremlin.
I'm going to throw it over to the audience in a second. My final question is, do you know if there's an awareness in Russia of this series being made? Do you have any sense of that?
I imagine, yeah.
I think certainly Andrei Lugovoy made a statement about it when we announced the show. I mean, that's a man who is not shy of publicity, but I think I'm certain they're aware of the show.
Yeah.
And I am very personally, I don't speak for anyone else on this panel, but personally, I'm very sort of, I'm very glad they have an awareness of the show. That's one of the whole points of us making it. The show is truthful and honourable, and I think it's as much as it can be. I think it's unbiased, and I think it makes, as Richard said, there's a turning point. It was a turning point in the UK's stand on Russia. But I should add to the end of that sentence, eventually it was. It took taken 16 years to get to that point. And I have to say, in making the show, as proud as the show, as Marina said very eloquently, as proud as the Metropolitan Police did the Litvinenko family, unfortunately the UK government can't be said so kindly about, unfortunately. And I think, the show, we tell that story, I hope, in an unbiased way. I don't think the UK government comes across particularly well in the show, and as much as the Russian state is responsible for so much of the atrocity that you see in the show, and we've seen since, I think the UK state has a huge case to answer for in how they've appeased that regime over the years.
I think, sorry, just on that point about the institutional resistance within the UK, and I think that's something that you and George really wanted to bring about, and it really does come through in the episodes to follow, which is a really important point. But yes, you're absolutely right. It took
and Marie, did you recognise that resistance by the British politicians to get involved and to launch any kind of inquiry, etc.?
It's quite complicated. It might take another 1 hour to discuss that.
That's a very good point. Considering we have to go. And
Lock the doors.
Let's go to the audience. So I think there are roving mics. Who has a question? Let's go first. Yes, lady, just. I think we can get a mic to you. 1 sec, so we can hear you. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Hi. Is David Tennant in every episode, or does it become more of a detective story?
you have to watch.
Obviously, as you've seen, Sasha dies at the end of episode 1, and the story is told very much in, I wouldn't say in real time, but it's told in a forward manner. So we follow the detectives as they investigate the case. I would say, what I would say about it is the show is called Litvinenko, and obviously it is about Sasha, but one of the reasons it's called Litvinenko is it's about the Litvinenko family, it's about Marina, and it's about Anatoly. And so obviously David's portrayal of Sasha is such a key part of episode 1, but actually the sort of, in story terms, the baton is passed to Marina, and we follow Marina, and indeed as Sasha passed the baton to Marina in real life. So we sort of represent that in the story as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just a lady, a couple of rows behind. Just that.
Thank you. Absolutely loved the first episode. Looking forward to the rest. Thank you, everyone. You touched on it towards the end of the interview. Was there any discussion between yourselves or anyone about not releasing this, given what's happened in Ukraine? Was there any question of it not coming out yet?
I don't think there was ever any question of it not coming out. I think it was a question of wanting to be sensitive to what's happening. But I think the most important thing is that this happened in 2006. We made this drama. We were shooting it 2 years ago now, year and a half ago now. Yeah. The story has resonance, today, and ever more resonant today. So certainly no nervousness on our part about it. Only just wanting to make sure that the story gets the broadest audience it can.
Yeah, just a couple of rows behind there.
Thank you. I also really liked the first episode. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
About the commissioning, was it difficult to get it commissioned? And what was the pitch? Did they sort of think, well, we've had the documentary, do we really need a drama? And then the second question for Marina, do you feel that there has been justice? Do you feel you have justice now?
Should I start off with the first?
I would answer the second question first because it's much more interesting.
Yeah.
Marina, has there been justice?
Okay. Because we have only public inquiry, and what I was really satisfied, because everything what was in a detective did, we all could present it, and was, I think, so precisely investigated without any questions. who was behind of this crime, who did it, and even police at the end, lawyer represented police department, said is a Russia state behind of this crime. We never could say policemen were politically motivated to investigate this case, but all evidence, all details just pointed it was a Russia state behind of this crime. And even more, when public inquiry was completed, we could see a name of Vladimir Putin. Of course, it was not saying he did it, but it was a very highly likely he knew this operation was provided in London. Never ever before Putin was put in this kind of accusation. And it was not only here in London, it happened in Strasbourg, in European Court of Human Rights, repeated absolutely in the same words. And this is, of course, justice for me. But people who committed this crime, like Lugavo and Kovtun died this summer from COVID. Again, we don't know, is it true or is it not? And somebody called me saying, oh, Marina, finally. I said, no, I actually not happy. I better to see him here in London for justice and saying who give it to him, Polonium, who gives this him order, and all who behind of this crime. But Lugavo still be a member of Russian Duma. But every time when we have this or drama or play on the stage or any documentary, it's pointed to Lugavoy as a crime, as a killer. And now even more, what we have Russia behind of this. And again, I'm always talking about Ukraine this evening because I can't not saying this. And it's more proof for what is happening in Ukraine. We have no any other word to Putin as a terrorist, killer, and murderer. It's all. And no any excuse and discussion to this man.
And the commissioning.
Commissioning.
Well, as Richard's pointed out, compared to Richard's experience in documentary making, drama commissioning and filmmaking can sometimes feel a little glacial. But I should say that ITV have been behind this project from the start and have supported it wholeheartedly. And it's not an easy story to tell. And it's not necessarily, despite being a very well-known story, it is a hard one to get right. I hope we've succeeded. But ITV have been behind it from the start, and actually it was originally commissioned as a 3-part series, and then George was very keen to tell a 4th part, which you'll see is the 4th episode, follows Marina as she continues to push for an inquiry, and ITV supported that. And they supported us through, I think it ended up being 3 pushes because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so not hard to get commissioned, but quite hard to make and get made.
But also to maintain the commitment. They really did, because
we had
a
to
lot of
hang on.
shows were collapsing when COVID kicked off, and there was a fear that something could happen to us. But no, we were saved. And again, the execs, so Lucy and Patrick, wherever you are, you did us a great.
We got there in the end.
Yeah, we got there.
Thank you.
So here it is.
Got time for one more question, I think. Oh, yes, the lady just in the middle of that row.
First of all, guys, thanks very much for bringing this story to life. It's very useful for those who were in London at the time and for those who went. It really does go into the right level of details. Thank you. Marina, question to you as a follow-up from the previous one. So what would it take for you to see the end of this quest, to end of this journey in an ideal world? And I think we sort of know what you might have to say on that matter. If you don't want to answer that, looking at the past 16 years, is there anything that you would have changed, the way things went? Do you really have something to say, okay, maybe if we did this and that instead of how it went, or not?
I think everything might be finished for me when one day I would be free to go to Russia and to feel safe and feel this country is back to normal civilized world. I could go maybe in 2006 after my husband was killed, but I knew I'm not able to go until I will not be known who killed my husband. And started this way, I cut all my possibility to go back to Russia. But I cut in other things. I could not see my parents, who was in Russia and who could travel to London, but not every time. And this was, of course, calculation. It's the right things I'm doing this, but I limited everything what I could do, like in a normal life. But from another side, it was a son, Anatoly. He was 12 when his dad died in front of him. And this was another way just to show to him all this time who was his father, and not just forget about and just say, okay, it's past and nothing, we have to do this with all what happened. And I think sometimes I'm try to think, was it right or was not right, maybe it's not right again. Like, I think all normal people. But at the end, I see is not only my story. When I see people who are approaching me saying, thank you very much for what you're doing, I say, okay, I can do it. And if it's useful for other people, I will do it. And I still have my normal life. I'm not sacrificing my life. I'm meeting my friends, dancing sometimes. It's all okay. But, you know, sometimes if you feel you can do it, you have to. It's okay.
Thank you. I think that's a brilliant way to end. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks to Jim, Richard, and particularly Marina. Thank you so much for coming and answering our questions. Thank you. Thank you to you for your questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.